There are two rules 50 Cent has for those in the web development space and how they can overcome the looming AI dominance. What's up, everybody? Welcome for the first time or back to another DLJ Works video. In Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent's book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, he drops a lot of gems for people in any profession on how they can succeed in achieving their goals following specific hustlenomics. Nothing illegal, all legal of course, but his background and what he has endured is shared throughout his book, such as embracing competition and using fear as fuel to rise above any circumstance. However, when listening to the audio, there is advice that stands out where it caught me like, this would be good to share with aspiring web developers. That advice is twofold. Number one, open doors on your own. And number two, do things for the bigger picture, even if it means doing it for free. Let's address number one. Now, on this channel, I've been relentlessly making videos, not telling, but showing viewers how to create their own opportunities using the resources that's out there, such as creating a YouTube channel and documenting your process. I will forever preach the gospel of documenting your process. But Mr. Jackson has some stories I would also like to share that reinforces the recommendations I have been sharing on this channel. Let's listen to story number one.
My most valuable internship came a few years later, after I signed to Columbia. Once I realized they were stalling the release of my album, I was left with the choice. Was I going to head back to the hood, or was I going to do something constructive while I waited? I chose the constructive path. The way I saw it, Columbia might have been stalling, but I was still signed to them. I still had access to their office. Every morning I would take the subway from South Jamaica to the Sony building in Midtown Manhattan. When I got there, I wasn't messing around, trying to flirt with assistants, or smoking weed in the stairwell like most of the visiting rappers. Nope, I got to work. I would pop in on every department and try to soak up as much information as possible. I'd visit OJ, who oversaw street radio promotions. I'd pick his brain and try to understand how he approached getting a single out to the right people. Then I'd go and sit with Yvette Gill, who was my publicist. I'd watch her work the phones with editors and journalists, trying to get stories placed in magazines. She was dealing with other people's projects, but I wanted to learn how the publicity machine worked. Then I'd go and shadow Julian, who was in charge of artwork. I'd ask him about his thought process when he was designing an album. What sort of visuals were effective at selling albums, and what sort of images didn't work as well. I basically did that with every department. I kept asking questions and soaking up information until I finally came to a realization. The label couldn't do everything for me. Through interning, I was able to see that I was going to have to make myself hot before OJ could get my song played, or Yvette would be able to get me magazine articles. I realized that the labels could build on momentum, but they were limited when it came to creating it. That's why I ended up releasing How to Rob. I realized that I needed to create a buzz that was going to jolt the label into action. I needed to create my own energy, not hope that someone was going to flip a switch for me. I would never have come to that realization if I hadn't first decided to create my own internship. They weren't paying me to come in every morning, but the information I absorbed was invaluable. Having a realistic understanding of what a record company wasn't going to do for me probably saved my career.
Despite 50's early get-rich-or-die-trying success, he humbled himself taking an internship at his record label so he can internally learn how the sausage of record making is made. Now, the key thing he learned is that record companies have limitations when it comes to an artist's career regarding promotion and development. One thing that also stood out is that he said artists don't really appreciate those limitations. They get signed and then they just get on cruise control. They put their hands of their livelihoods into that of the record holders. But the sobering truth is that in knowing labels are limited, this knowledge by itself should push you to take matters in your own hands when it comes to your own career. In context for web developers, stop looking for jobs depending on companies to create professional history/experiences for you. Now, you, my fine feathered friend, are going to have to create your own experience. Now, whether it's taking on freelance projects for free or asking for an intern at a company or the following information on this channel, which is using YouTube as a portfolio case study, you have no excuses as to why you can't build your own pathway. When I got my website manager job back in 2019, the owner sought me out based on a word of mouth and a work that I already had out there online. Instead of pumping and dumping resumes onto Monster and LinkedIn living on a prayer, You should be creating content and serving others with no expectations. Get endorsements, get testimonials, which will then be your historical proof about the work that you put in. Now, I often disregard payment and ask for written LinkedIn endorsements and testimonials to polish my own reputation as much as possible. Another gift in 50's story isn't just him serving for free to create his own experience, but how a French web developer by the name of, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Corentin Villemeur, took his G-Unit fandom to kick the door wide open to work directly under 50 Cent. Man, you know, it's interesting. Corentin took his, and many of y'all ask me questions about this, but how can I actually get a job just using my own HTML background? And this is what makes Corentin's story that much more interesting, because he took that singular HTML knowledge to improve the then Flash built This Is 50 website to run more optimally. Now, mind you, Corentin offered to do this for free, as he knew what the end game was, which was to work for the 50 Cent brand back in the days of when he was doing Get Rich or Die Trying, or I think it was The Massacre. I can't remember which album, but it was in those earlier days. As a matter of fact, if you don't believe me, just listen to out of 50 Cent's mouth himself in terms of what he says about Corentin and how he actually kicked the door open to get hired under him.
Someone who really capitalized on intern experience was Corentin Villemeur, the photographer I mentioned earlier. Corentin grew up in France, where he was a huge hip-hop fan. In 2006, he decided to move to New York City so he could be closer to the culture. When he got to NYC, one of the first things he did was look up the number for the G-Unit offices, since he was a big fan of our music and lifestyle. He called up, asked if we were hiring, and was told nope, no jobs were available. Corentin didn't accept no for an answer, though. Instead, a few days later, he physically showed up at the office and knocked on the door, hoping to make a case for himself in person. He explained that he had just moved to New York from France, was a huge G-Unit fan, and was willing to do whatever it took to work with us. He met Nicky Martin, who was intrigued by his story. But since there really weren't any jobs available, Nicky told him, "We'll be in touch if anything opens up." Usually that phrase marks the end of the story, but Corentin still wasn't ready to give up. In addition to being a hip-hop fan, Corentin was also a skilled computer coder. At the time, we had just launched thisis50.com, which was running on Flash. Corentin knew the site would run much better on HTML, which at the time very few people were knowledgeable about. So he called the office back and explained that he knew a way to improve our website. Now he really had our attention. When it was clear he knew what he was talking about, we offered him an internship working on the site. Corentin jumped at it, and true to his word, almost immediately made the site better. That establishes value within the organization. I promoted him from an intern to the person in charge of all my internet platforms. Since he was also a very skilled photographer, he became my in-house photographer. In that role, he's gotten to travel the globe with me, from Africa to Australia, taking pictures and experiencing hip-hop on a global scale. Corentin was able to make his dream back in France a reality because he understood two key concepts. The first was persistence. He didn't wait for us to post a job listing somewhere. He took the initiative to cold call our offices. When that didn't lead anywhere, he showed up at the office. That visit didn't directly lead to a job, but it helped him establish a connection with Nicky. It allowed him to go from a name on the email to someone with a story, someone who made a positive impression. The second smart thing Corentin did is he didn't call us back asking for an internship. Instead, he offered us something. He studied our organization, saw where we could use improvement, and then saw where he could add value. I don't care if it's hip-hop, film, or the financial sector. If you can make a convincing case that you can add value to an organization, they're going to find a spot for you. Once you've got that spot, now you can build up your value.
What we can learn from both of these accounts is that your pride and ego can be the greatest obstacle in the world to your own career growth. I'm telling you this because I'm speaking from experience directly. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, man, I worked all these years, these hours building up my skills, learning WordPress, all this coding. Shoot, somebody gonna pay me. And look, I get it. That was my attitude when I was first starting out. And all the years I spent time building it up. And this was around the time I was 29, 30 years old, and I was just scrappy and hungry, but still prideful. At some point, I had to humble myself and just start from the bottom. I gave myself projects and put those in a portfolio. Then I asked to work and collaborate with others to help with their website services just to continue to gather my own experience. Then back in 2016, I started a YouTube channel to share what I was learning and document how a lot of the code that is written, and to also show that I can articulate the code that I was writing. Man, you know, from all this upfront work, it saved me the hassle of having to do like mass applying on sites such as LinkedIn and other job sites. So my LinkedIn inbox and Gmail was full of requests and offers. And this was a result of me just simply creating my own experiences. And just like Corentin, take your skills and expertise and learn what problems a company is having. Offer to work on the house to solve that problem and then over deliver. I mean, in the end, all it's going to do is just build rapport and goodwill between you and the company if you are looking to get hired. However, if you're not even looking for traditional work, or you just want to freelance and just be on your own, well, there's a little bonus tip in this video, and I want you to hear it directly from the horse's mouth, straight from 50 Cent himself. Let's listen again to his story.
Get it on paper. A final word on making sure you always get your fair value. While it's critical to establish your worth, once you do, the most important thing you can do is get it down on paper. Getting all your agreements, promises, and plans down on paper in the form of a contract is absolutely essential. Never let your value rest on someone's word. So many deals in hip-hop have been cemented with a handshake or a pound, instead of a signature on a dotted line. I've heard so many big promises that never get delivered on. It's easy to promise someone half of nothing. It's easy to promise someone you're going to take care of them once we get on. But as soon as someone starts getting paid, those promises get forgotten. Handshake agreements aren't worth. When the money starts coming in, the knives start coming out. Protect yourself. Put it on paper.
When I was freelancing, I did do a lot of projects just to build my portfolio. However, when I felt that I was good enough to start getting paid for them, the insecurities and inexperience began to just creep in. Man, I didn't know how to be assertive, I wasn't sticking to deadlines, nor did I communicate the terms and conditions effectively with clients, which led them to run all over me. Now, that changed when I began to learn contract writing, building terms into my work between clients. Eventually, I became more confident when speaking to prospects and standing my ground on what was acceptable and unacceptable. Soon, this filtered out those who were serious about paying and those just looking for a free ride. Now, in the beginning, I was desperate, but soon left the world of desperation into the proverbial "I don't need you" mindset, which increased my attraction of potential clients in need of my services. But the urge to get over on people is real, and paperwork is an insurance policy you can't afford not to include in your web development practices. And as always, I like to take care of the viewer, teaching you how to do multiple things, and contract writing is one of them, where you can learn that for free right here in this video.